Nashville, Music City, was filled with all kinds of characters in the early 1980s, and this is a story about one of them. January 1982, Mel Tillis's hat. I moved to Nashville from Knoxville to take a new position as operations manager for TVA's Office of Economic and Community Development. The office was in the 1719 West End building, located on West End Avenue, about 2 blocks from the famous Music Row in Nashville. The building was a 10-story structure, including an occupied basement. The top floor housed the offices of Wayne Odom. He was the very first Wendy's franchisee at the time and their largest. The basement housed a nightclub and bar owned by Carl Perkins, the early rock and roll performer and songwriter famous for writing Blue Suede Shoes. And I was usually his most faithful and first customer of the day. I smoked 2 packs of filterless Pale Mel cigarettes in those days. When I arrived at the office, I usually stopped at a souvenir shop on the first floor and picked up a pack. In the late afternoon, before hitting Carl Perkins' place, I usually stopped in for my second pack. The shop belonged to Mel Tillis. He was a talented country music singer and songwriter. At the time, he was near his peak, having a long list of top 10 hits as a member of the outlaw country movement. Mel had a bad stutter, but it did not affect his singing voice. In contrast to most country stars, Mel was an astute money manager and investor. The souvenir shop had been his first investment, and although it was only crowded during the 2 weeks of the Music City Fan Fest and didn't make the kind of money his radio stations and recording studios did, it was still his favorite investment. Almost every afternoon when he was not on the road, he would stop in and talk to any fans that might happen to be in the place. He got his start in the 1950s and opened the shop as the first tenant in the building. His shop manager, Mary, had been with him since the very beginning, and they were more like siblings than anything. Over time, we all got to know each other on a first-name basis. I found him to be very friendly, generous, and kind-hearted. He was incredibly funny, and I loved talking with him. One afternoon, Mel came in looking like he had just come off a 1,000-mile Chisholm Trail cattle drive. He was wearing dusty, worn-down cowboy boots, raggedy jeans, and a plaid shirt, and a beat-up old black cowboy hat. Mary took one look at him and said, "You look like you've been rode hard and put up wet, or been rolling around in some back alley on a 3-day drunk. I don't know which." Mel didn't say a thing, just giving her his usual sheepish grin. She said, "You really need to get some new boots and a new hat." Mel said, "Well, you're right, but I like this hat. I got it on Park Avenue in New York." I said, "I like it too. Would you consider selling it?" He pulled it off, looking at it as he turned his head from side to side, and then he said, I don't know how much it's worth. What would you give me?" I said, "Would you take $25? He gave me one of his famous grins and said, "Done." I gave him 2 10s and a 5, and he took the hat off and placed it on my head. I still have the hat. Several years ago, I took it to Letty's, a famous western wear shop in Fort Worth, and I asked them if they could restore it. Their hat expert took a look at it, and he turned it around side to side and finally said, "This is a fine hat." He asked where I got it, and I told him. He said, "That explains it." I said, "Explains what?" He said, "You couldn't buy a hat like that today for less than $800 to $1,000, and that is if you could find one in the first place." He restored it perfectly, and I wear it on special occasions. Honestly, my only regret is I did not have Mel sign it. Thank you.